Good day, everybody, and welcome back here to the Daytona International Speedway as we get ready to resume practice sessions here at the World Center of Racing before our Twin 125 qualifying races tomorrow. Those will be beginning at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Yesterday, if you just watched our recap footage, you would already know that Audra Baranauskas is our pole sitter for the Daytona 500, and Benny Watson will be starting outside front row for the Great American Race. And our driver, whom was amongst one of those that had to either time in or race in, Janiah Hill, clocked her way in at a 45.735 due to the varying weather conditions that had changed throughout the course of the day. Her 45.735 was third quickest, and that was enough to lock her into the show. So now she is the 36th driver into the Great American Race, and we've already gotten the cars divided up into the groups in which they will be in the qualifying races with. So this is twin number 1 that is out on track right now, and we're looking at RAYNE driving the number 3 for this Daytona 500 weekend. Remember, she ended up finishing inside of the top 5 in the Clash earlier this week, this past Sunday. And she finished up Daytona 500 pole qualifying yesterday. As I'm scrolling through this list here, trying to find her name, I highlighted some of the drivers' names in blue to signify who was going to be in qualifying race number 1. And Allison Rain ended up finishing 39th on the line in her qualifying effort. She qualified at a 46.699. And right here, Hannah Higdon is just timed in at a 45.241. The times are going to be changing as this session goes on. So these drivers are just doing what they can to not only learn about drafting, well, to kind of learn what their car is going to do in the draft, but also try to set up their car throughout single car runs. You see Ethan Lewis here in the number 12 coming to pit road. Lewis will be a part of qualifying race number 1. He clocked in at a 46.722. Same thing for Marty Johnson, also clocked in at a 46.722. And we're looking at this group right here that is being led by pole sitter Audra Baranauskas. She'll be starting on the pole in Twin 125 number 1. That will be, like I said, as I mentioned earlier, those festivities will be beginning at 12 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. And we will be determining the final 6 drivers that will be in the show for Sunday's big day. There'll be 3 spots available per qualifying race, just to point that out. There's Zachary Taylor amongst one of the drivers that has to race into the Daytona 500. Taylor didn't do the best in his qualifying group. Well, he timed in at 53rd on the line with a 46.725, so he would be starting 26th, I want to say, on the qualifying order. So as we come through the field here, just to get a glimpse of where everybody is, Lewis is coming back out on track. Our winner from the Clash, Ryan DURRANI, is currently sitting 43.866 on the board. Now he's dropped down to 14th. But these drivers, as I mentioned, they are going to be trying the best that they can to get their cars tuned up for the Twin 125s tomorrow. Weather is definitely going to be a big factor because these drivers in this group are practicing under the cloudy conditions. So whatever the weather is going to be for tomorrow, for all we know, the weather tomorrow could be sunny. And these drivers may have their cars set up for the cloudy conditions and for the higher grip level as well. But we all know that when the sun is out, the grip level is not as good as it would be with the cloud cover. And the racetrack's going to be pretty slick, so the drivers may be slip sliding around, especially sliding up the banking, kind of where BRAYDEN PEREZ is through turns 1 and 2 and also through 3 and 4. But we mainly saw those drivers drift up the racetrack through turns 3 and 4 and also 1 and 2 during the qualifying sessions. Even though, unfortunately, we weren't able to get them televised, but you did see through the qualifying recap piece that was broadcasted yesterday to bring you up to speed on qualifying. Some drivers were moving up to the top line, kind of like what's happening here with Clifton, Cross, PINHEIRO, and also Emily Anderson. All 4 of those cars lined up single file. Man, just look at this shot right here. Noah Clifton leading the other 3 cars. PINHEIRO diving low as they go into turn 1. Now, you just heard right there, the drivers had to check up going into the first corner because you don't want to have a lot of speed getting into turn number 1, because if you go in to turn 1 wide open, chances are your car's going to get tight and you'll have to chase the car up the track. And usually if you have to do that, especially with a pack of cars much bigger than this, you could cause a lot of problems. So that's the last thing that you want to do, and you'll just want to have to try to take it easy through getting into the first corner and try to make sure that you can get through turn 1 in one piece. I can't even speak, but you get what I mean. There's Aaron Abel, car number 2, the Pepsi Kroger Pontiac Grand Prix. Abel timed in at a 46.679. So Abel would be qualifying a little bit further up than what Zachary Taylor would be, whom we mentioned earlier. Taylor would be starting 26th on the grid for tomorrow's Twin 125. And just as we're scrolling through the field here, you see Bradley Aitkens is at the top of the charts. Much, much faster. Much, much faster than what these cars were going during single car qualifying. A 42.816. That's all in the draft, by the way. All of this was done in the draft. So, not too bad there for Bradley Aitkens. Definitely showing that his car is pretty strong in the draft and in these cloudy conditions. There's Ethan Lewis just trying to do the best he can to get a snippet of the draft from Sean Art's car. At least he's trying to do the best that he can to catch up to this group, so that way he can just get into this pack and try to see what his car is going to do in the draft. Especially, like I said, under these cloudy conditions, because your car can handle much different in a pack with cloud cover versus racing in a pack without cloud cover. So, you know, the handling does vary. So it's a good thing that these drivers are doing the best that they can to try to figure out the balance of their car and see if they can have all the carts play into their favor. I mean, it's going to be a difficult challenge at that, because chances are our Twin 125 races could be sunny tomorrow. So I mean, you never know. You just never know. So of the drivers that are in the must race their way in situation, I believe the fastest driver is Zachary Taylor, I would believe. No, excuse me, that would be John Andrews. Now timed in second on the board with a 42.819. Hannah Higdon is third with a 42.834. That's all within this group. And Bradley Aitkens is a part of that group as well. He just rejoined the racetrack. Still holding on to the top spot with a 42.816. Still not a bad job there for Bradley Aitkens. Definitely showing a lot of strength in a pack right now. I mean, he's definitely got a really good car when it comes down to the draft. Usually here at Daytona, you don't have to have the fastest car in the field. You just have to have a good and also kind of a good handling car, but one where you're where you're just on the edge. where you're comfortable, but you're not at the same time. You're on the edge of your seat. And also on top of that, if you can have a car that can draft really well. I hope that makes sense, but still. Sometimes you just got to have the cards play into your favor, and Bradley Aikens might have that coming into the Twin 125s. Bradley Aikens, as I said, I believe mentioned earlier, clocked in at a 46.715 during single car qualifying yesterday. So from the looks of things, he'd be starting mid-pack in the Twin 125s. The slowest out of everybody was in this Twin 125 group. Sadly, I hate to say it, was Chase Pinheiro. The weather didn't quite play into her favor, more particularly when it came to temperatures, but also when it came to the wind direction. Had a lot of wind coming from the, I believe it was the southeast, and it created such a headwind down the back straightaway. And it slowed Chase Pinheiro down quite a bit, and she clocked in at a 46.820, so she would be starting in the back for the Twin 125s tomorrow. But the good news is that she wouldn't have to worry so much about losing touch with the pack. She just have to worry about trying to keep her car in one piece, because these cars are going to be not only 3 wide at times, but they'll mostly be double file, just shuffling positions all the way through the 20 laps. In both races, by the way, both races are 20 laps. But they'll be shuffling positions just like you're shuffling cards. But, you know, at that same time, you know, these drivers are going to have to be very courteous, very meticulous with their race cars, try to bring them back in one piece, and not only try to earn a good spot for the Daytona 500, but as far as drivers like Logan Cross and Emily Anderson, both of them are going to have to figure out if they're going to be in the show or not. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of drivers that will be on their toes for tomorrow's races, and we're going to have a lot of blood pressures be very high, with the exception of Janiyah Hill. Janiyah is locked into the Daytona 500 regardless of what happens, because remember, she clocked her way into the race by being 3rd quickest in qualifying. And I thought it was going to be Felix Jensen, because Jensen had himself a really good time with a 45.828. He does have a very strong car at that. However, though, Janiyah Hill definitely had a lot up her sleeve, and she almost by 14 one-thousandths of a second almost took the pole away from Audra Baranauskas, but still, you got to give it to her. She gave it her best effort, and it was enough to lock her into the show. And she's 3rd quickest, 42.813. Ryan Durrani, our Clash winner, the fastest time right now, 42.785. Reagan Whitlock had the fastest time earlier with his 42.800. But Ryan Durrani came along and just whipped it away. Minute and a half to go here in this session. Your top 10 right now goes as follows. Ryan Durrani is on top of the charts. Reagan Whitlock 2nd. Janiyah Hill 3rd. Bradley Aikens 4th. John Andrews, Hannah Higdon. Zachary Fitzwater, who's in this pack, is in 7th. Zachary Taylor, Braden Lane, and also Stephen Colon rounds out the top 10. Speaking of Braden Lane, he did end up subbing for Daniel Voiles in opening practice back on Monday. Voiles is here. He is at the Speedway, and he will be going next here when it comes to our practice sessions here in just under a minute. And Voiles clocked in at a 46.726, which isn't a bad time. However, though, he will be starting near the back in the Twin 125s in the second Twin 125 qualifying race. I'd say that would have to be 20. That'd have to be 28th. That's got to be 28th position. No, sorry, 27th position. That's my bad. He'd be starting 27th in that race. See Reagan Whitlock aborting. Coming to pit road. Looks like that's going to be the end of his practice session. We are winding down anyway, so I wouldn't blame him too much. So another 42 seconds have been added, so that way these drivers can get one more good lap down. Chances are the drivers are going to be making it back to the line to finalize their time would have to be in this group and also this 4-car group right here that's being led by Chase Pinheiro. Speaking of Pinheiro, she has clocked into this practice session with a 43.322. But the chances of her getting a much better time are a little bit slim because she was at the front of this pack, receiving the push, not giving the push. And times will be finalized in another 3 seconds now. And our Clash winner, Ryan Durrani, whom actually did a pretty good job in qualifying yesterday, won the Clash back on Sunday, is on top of the charts. I believe I just passed him here recently. There he is. He just clocked in on this practice session with a 42.785. Ryan Durrani under the clouds is on a roll right now. Will he be able to win his Twin 125 race to start third in the Daytona 500? We're just going to have to find out tomorrow. But until then, we got to get past this group of Daytona 500 practice sessions. Group 2 will be coming up next. Don't go away. We'll be right back. We're back here at the Daytona International Speedway, and just a few short minutes ago, the sun had just popped its very bright head out from the clouds, and now we're going to have ourselves some very slick conditions. First car coming out onto the track, that's Will Parrish. In car number 1, he ended up finishing qualifying in the 6th position, so he'd be starting third in his Twin 125, a 45.802, tied with Michael Ramsey, who will be in qualifying race number 1, also starting third. So Parrish, regardless of what happens, he is locked into the show, and it has been. Same thing can be said for Reggie Fogleman. Fogleman didn't do well. He did okay in his qualifying run of 46.667. So he'd be starting, I believe, just inside of the top 20 in this qualifying race. Oh gosh, excuse me. Derek Hamill in car number 29. Derek Hamill would end up, I believe, starting 10th, and I believe he'd start 10th in the race. Let me see here. So, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. He'd be starting 9th. So he'd be starting 9th in the second Twin 125 tomorrow. And the second twin would obviously be just a little bit after the first Twin 125, which would begin at 12 p.m. Eastern. Coverage would begin at 12 p.m. Eastern. The green flag would have to be just probably about 3 to 5 minutes after coverage begins. But so far, starting off this group of practice for the second group, Art Leonard is at the top of the charts with a 45.599. Now, our outside pole sitter, Benny Watson, picking up right where he left off. Oh, no, crash! Oh, my gosh! Leonard and Voiles flipping on the banking. Oh, my goodness gracious. And that involved 3 cars that had to race their way into, that have to race into the Daytona 500 tomorrow. Leonard in the 70, Voiles in the 18. I don't even know how he's able to drive this thing back, but he's going to make it to pit road smoking. And also Trinity Ida in the 22. Ida's got some damage on the front end of her car. And also a little bit on the right side as well. Man, you just saw that live. Luckily, though, in this edition, debris does not stay on the racetrack. So these drivers will not have to. This we won't have to worry about putting out a red flag here. So they just keep on going. Man, look at the damage on the 22. You just barely see it. But there is damage on this 22 car. I can promise you that. Man. Like I said, all three of those cars, all three drivers have to make the race. They have to try to make their way into the Daytona 500. Man, and that's not a good way to start. That, and believe it or not, that was our first crash. That was our first crash of this entire Speedweeks. Right there. That's crazy. That's obvious. That's very insane. Because in the clash, I thought we were going to have ourselves a wreck because of the way that they were racing. But thankfully, since it was only just a 12-car field, we didn't have to worry too much about it. But focusing back in here, Benny Watson still on top of the charts, 45-111 for car number 83. I believe Craig Martin just jumped to third with a 44-250. We have 2 3-car packs. This one single file. Meanwhile, Bethany MOTORKRASS trying to go underneath of Kurt Kemp and also Cody McGorrick. MOTORKRASS does not have to worry about making her way into the Daytona 500. All she's got to worry about is where she's going to start. She ended up finishing qualifying yesterday 10th with a 45-8-12, so she'll be starting 5th in tomorrow's Twin 125. Kurt, and also for Cody, Kurt timed in yesterday. See if I can find it. I scrolled right over it. Kurt timed in at a 46-658. And Cody McGorrick ended up clocking in at a 46-763. So Cody would be starting 29th in that qualifying race. I don't know where Kurt would start, unfortunately. And I'm not going to take the time to figure that out. I'll do that later. 43-696 for Brad Crawford. Crawford does have to make the show. And so far, I just scrolled right past him. Why did I do that? Anyways, Crawford does have to make the show. And and from the looks of things, if his car is this good under the sunny conditions and in the draft, he's in for he could have himself a really good performance, but only if his cards are played correctly. Because remember, as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, these cars, all the drivers, as soon as that green flag drops in both of these Twin 125s, individually at least, these cars will be shuffling positions just like you're shuffling cards in an Uno deck. These drivers will be shuffling positions lap after lap after lap. So it will be very difficult to maintain your position, at least not just all race, but at least for a small portion of it as well. So that's something that these drivers are going to have to heavily be concerned about going into tomorrow's Twin 125 qualifying races. Especially if you're in a position like Cody McGorrick, Kurt Kemp, and even Brad Crawford are. And even John Stewart. Stewart just came up onto the racetrack. Luckily, everybody was able to get by him, unlike Leonard and also Daniel Voiles. Speaking of Voiles, first of all, he is back out on track with a backup car, drafting with Elijah Gordon, Marty Johnson, and also Will Parrish. Gordon, Voiles, and Johnson, all three have history with each other on the racetrack. And speaking of Gordon timed in at a 44.499, now 22nd on the board. Voiles is 27th with a 44.651. Marty Johnson is, I just scrolled right past it, 26th with a 44.640. Parrish in this group, since he is here, a 44.521. So he's the second quickest out of this 4-car group right here. That's 2 Chevys, 1 Pontiac, 1 Buick. That's not bad, actually. Out of these 4 cars, I'd say that's pretty impressive. To the line, all 4 of these drivers single file, approaching the 6-minute remaining mark. Look at Gordon trying to peek to the inside. No help at all. Now Voiles ducks low to go with him. Remember, these 2 are Chevrolet teammates. They're not actual race teammates, but they're manufacturer teammates. Sorry, I did get distracted with something, but still, either way. Gordon trying to get by Will Parrish with some drafting help from Daniel Voiles. These 2 will probably be working together in the twin 125s if they're able to find each other. And so far, they haven't made a lot of progress in moving their way up on the scoreboard. They're still relatively right where they were before. But chances are that might change. Eventually. We have no idea when, but eventually that might change. But Crawford is still on top with a 43.696, and also, as far as Art Leonard is concerned, yes, he is back out on track. 17th with a 44.168 in this pack. It's amazing of how fast some of these drivers are able to whip out their backup cars and get back out on track. It is very impressive at that. 11th once again, still with a 43, now with a 43.893. It's not too bad. Not too bad for Leonard. So your top 10 right now goes as follows. Brad Crawford still on top with a 43.696. William Brock jumps to second with a 43.732. Third is Owen Miles with a 43.741. Then you have John Stewart with a 43.742. Austin Christie in this pack rounds out the top 5. Bethany Motorkrass, Amy Wilderotter, Carter Joey, Benny Watson, and also Ryan Kendall complete the top 10 with under 4 minutes remaining. There's Daniel Voiles on pit road taking 4 tires. We won't have to worry too much about pit stops during the twin 125s, so these drivers will be going all through the 20 laps that they have in their races on the same set of tires and also the same fuel. Well, on one tank of fuel and 1 set of tires, basically, for 20 laps. Chances are, on the Daytona 500, they will have to worry about pit stops where they might be split into thirds. I have no idea how that will work, but realistically, I am going to do some testing with that, so I will let you know in advance well, before the green flag drops in the Daytona 500, that is. McGorrick stays low. Parrish gets held up by McGorrick. Meanwhile, Gordon and Johnson go by. That might be the name of the game when it comes to the pit stops in the Daytona 500, and we might be practicing for a photo finish right here. Johnson just didn't get Gordon at the line there. Just think if that was the finish of the race. A side-by-side run to the line. 2.5 minutes to go. And Brad Crawford still on top. His 43.696 has still remained untouched ever since he got out on track. Trinity is still on the speedway with the damage that she has right now. She's still actually holding her own for the moment, at least. She still is holding on to dead last. 44.508 with her Bellio. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Her Bellio car. But still, it's number 22. Speaking of that, Trinity Ida did time in dead last. 62nd with a 46.875. So she would be starting right where she is in this group right here of the drivers that have timed in dead last. It is kind of a tough break, but at the same time, I mean, she won't have to worry about losing the draft whatsoever. She will be moving her way through the field just like any other driver would that would be starting in the back at least. And then, like I said, the drivers will be shuffling positions like they're shuffling Uno cards. It's going to go by quick, so, I mean, these drivers are just going to have to hope and pray that they can play their cards right. 1 minute remaining. 1 minute remaining. Now 50 seconds to go here in Daytona 500 qualifying. Tomorrow, as I mentioned, will be the twin 125s to determine the rest of the starting lineup for the Daytona 500. You won't want to miss it. The coverage begins tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. 12 p.m. Eastern Time. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be fun, and it's going to be absolutely insane. 36 cars are locked into the Daytona 500. And the other 26 are going to be fighting to get into the big race. Only 6 more drivers can get in. It's going to be big. Like I said, you won't want to miss it. Coverage begins tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Practice is now up. 43 seconds have been added on the clock, so that way these drivers can add one more good lap to their times before they get finalized. With Kelsey Higdon here in this number 86 leading the charge in this group. Higdon clocked in this practice session. If I just missed it, 25th with a 43.968. Gordon, who will be starting outside pole, and twin number 2 is 29th with a 44.050. Not a good way to end off the session. But the good news is, like I said, he'll be starting outside pole in tomorrow's twin 125. The second twin 125. Times are in, and Brad Crawford will be the fastest in the second group with a 43.696. That's the strongest time that we've seen all week, at least under the sunny conditions. At least the 42.785. Still the strongest time that we've seen all week, just in general, with our Clash winner, Ryan DURRANI. And that's it. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. So those are our practice sessions for the second Daytona 500 practice. So coming up tomorrow, as I mentioned over and over, will be the twin 125s to determine the rest of the starting grid for the Daytona 500. We already know Janiah Hill is going to be locked into the big show, but the question is, who will be the other 6 drivers that will be joining her in the starting lineup for the Daytona 500? We're just going to have to find out. Like I said, tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern, that's when coverage begins for the Twin 125 qualifying races. We hope to see you tomorrow. And that about does it for me. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow for the Daytona 500 Twin 125 qualifying races.